The night she agreed to become a billionaire's fake fiancé, she had exactly $17 in her bank account, a borrowed coat on her shoulders, and nowhere to sleep. She thought she was accepting a temporary arrangement that would solve a few desperate problems. She never imagined that the little girl standing behind the billionaire would become the family she never knew she needed, or that the cold, guarded man offering her a contract would eventually look at her as though she were the only person in the world he was afraid to lose. 24-year-old Emily Carter had learned early that life did not always reward good people. She had grown up in a tiny apartment above a laundromat, raised by a grandmother who had worked until her hands became permanently stiff. Emily had never dreamed of luxury. She had wanted something much simpler, a safe home, enough food in the refrigerator, and a job that would allow her to stop counting every coin before buying groceries. After her grandmother passed away, Emily inherited nothing except a small box of photographs, a worn silver bracelet, and the habit of pretending she was stronger than she really was. If you believe everyone deserves kindness, second chances, and someone who sees their worth when the world does not, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Your support helps us continue sharing stories about compassion, courage, and unexpected second chances. Emily worked mornings at a neighborhood bakery and evenings cleaning offices in a downtown building. She slept in a small room rented from an elderly woman who was kind enough to let her pay late when work was scarce. Her life was exhausting but predictable, and Emily had convinced herself that predictable was enough. Then, one rainy Thursday evening, everything changed. She was walking home through the city when she noticed a little girl sitting alone on the steps outside an expensive hotel. The child was about 7 years old, wearing a pale blue dress beneath a dark cardigan. Her shoes were wet, her brown hair was tangled by the rain, and she was clutching a small stuffed rabbit against her chest. Emily stopped immediately. There was something about the girl's expression that made her forget her own exhaustion. The girl wasn't crying. Somehow, that made it worse. She was simply staring at the pavement with the empty expression of a child who had learned that crying did not always bring anyone back. Emily approached slowly, crouched several feet away, and offered her umbrella. The girl looked at it, then at Emily, before quietly accepting. Emily didn't ask intrusive questions. She simply sat beside her on the wet steps and stayed. 20 minutes later, a black luxury vehicle stopped near the entrance. A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit stepped out. He looked like the kind of person who belonged on the cover of a financial magazine, early 30s, dark hair, sharp features, controlled expression, and the unmistakable presence of someone accustomed to having every room fall silent when he entered it. But the moment he saw the little girl sitting beside Emily, something in his expression broke. He hurried toward them. The little girl immediately reached for him, and he lifted her into his arms. His relief was obvious, but so was his anger at himself. He had been attending a business meeting upstairs when his daughter had slipped away with her nanny and wandered outside after becoming upset. Emily stood and prepared to leave, but the man stopped her. He wanted to thank her. She refused any reward. She told him she had only done what anyone should have done. He studied her for a moment, as though those words were unfamiliar. His name was Daniel Whitmore, the founder and CEO of one of the largest technology investment companies in the country. Newspapers described him as brilliant, ruthless, private, and nearly impossible to impress. But Emily knew none of that. She only knew he was a father whose daughter had been frightened, and she knew the child had trusted her. The next morning, Emily received a phone call that she assumed was a mistake. Daniel asked to meet her. She nearly refused, but curiosity won. They met at a quiet restaurant. Daniel looked uncomfortable, which surprised her. He was accustomed to negotiating multi-million-dollar acquisitions, yet he struggled to explain what he wanted from a woman who had been carrying a second-hand umbrella the night before. His problem was simple but complicated. His company's board was preparing to remove him from his position unless he demonstrated greater personal stability. Daniel had been raising his daughter alone since his wife had died several years earlier, and the constant pressure of his career had made him withdraw from nearly everyone around him. The board believed his isolation was damaging the company. His family believed he needed to remarry. Investors were beginning to question whether he had anyone capable of sharing responsibility with him. Daniel did not want a real relationship. He wanted a fake engagement. Emily stared at him, certain she had misunderstood. He offered her a contract. 6 months. Public appearances. Family events. No physical expectations. Separate bedrooms. Financial compensation large enough to erase every debt she had and give her enough money to begin a new life. Emily should have walked away. Instead, she thought about the overdue rent notice folded inside her purse. She thought about the bakery owner who had warned her that her hours might be reduced. She thought about the little girl with the stuffed rabbit. Then Daniel mentioned one final condition. His daughter, Sophie, had asked if Emily could visit again. That was the moment Emily accepted. The arrangement began awkwardly. Emily moved into Daniel's enormous house, where everything was polished, quiet, and painfully beautiful. She had never lived anywhere with marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, or a kitchen larger than her entire childhood apartment. But Sophie didn't care about any of it. She cared that Emily remembered how she liked her toast. She cared that Emily sat beside her during thunderstorms. She cared that Emily didn't force her to talk about her mother. She cared that Emily noticed when she was pretending to be happy. Slowly, the enormous house changed. Emily brought flowers from the cheap market. She placed colorful cushions on the cold furniture. She taught Sophie how to make cookies without burning them. She started eating dinner at the kitchen table instead of allowing everyone to disappear into separate rooms. Daniel watched from a distance. At first, he considered Emily a temporary solution. Then he began noticing things. He noticed that Emily always made sure the security staff ate before she did when food was left over after an event. He noticed that she remembered the names of the household employees. He noticed that she repaired Sophie's broken stuffed rabbit herself instead of buying a new one. And he noticed that his daughter laughed more. Not the polite laugh she sometimes gave adults. A real laugh. One evening, Daniel came home early and found Emily asleep on the living room sofa while Sophie rested against her shoulder, reading a children's book. The television was off. A blanket covered both of them. Daniel stood in the doorway for several minutes. For the first time in years, his house looked like a home. That frightened him. Because Daniel had promised himself he would never love anyone that deeply again. His wife had died unexpectedly, and he had spent years blaming himself for not being there when she needed him. He had buried the pain beneath meetings, investments, and endless work. He believed emotional distance protected people from loss. Emily slowly proved him wrong. But not everyone was happy about their arrangement. Daniel's mother, Eleanor, believed Emily was using her son. She had spent years protecting the family's reputation and considered Emily's background embarrassing. She investigated her life and found nothing scandalous, which only made Eleanor more suspicious. Then came the night that nearly destroyed everything. At a charity gala, Emily overheard two wealthy women discussing her. They laughed about the poor girl, who had supposedly found a shortcut into a billionaire's family. Emily tried to ignore them. But then Eleanor approached her privately and told her that the arrangement was becoming dangerous. She said Daniel was developing genuine feelings and that Emily needed to remember her place. Emily returned home that night and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time since entering Daniel's world, she wondered whether she belonged there at all. The next morning, she began packing. She had no intention of taking Daniel's money. She left the contract compensation untouched. She placed the keys to the house on the kitchen counter and wrote a short note explaining that she could no longer continue pretending. But before she could leave, Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs. The little girl saw the suitcase. Her face changed. Emily knew immediately that Sophie understood. The child ran down the stairs and wrapped her arms around Emily. Emily closed her eyes. She had spent her whole life learning how to leave before people could abandon her. But now someone was asking her to stay. Daniel appeared moments later. He saw the suitcase. He saw the letter. And for the first time, the controlled billionaire completely lost his composure. He told Emily that if she wanted to leave, he would never stop her. He admitted the contract had started as a business arrangement, but it had stopped being one a long time ago. Emily couldn't believe him. Daniel confessed that he had fallen in love with her. Not because she was beautiful, although he thought she was. Not because she had transformed his house, although she had. He loved her because she had walked into his life with almost nothing and somehow made everyone around her feel as though they had enough. He told her that she had taught Sophie that kindness did not have to be earned. She had taught him that love did not mean losing someone. Sometimes, love meant allowing yourself to live again after loss. Emily cried. She admitted that she loved him too, but she was terrified. She had spent her entire life feeling like an outsider, and she didn't know how to become part of a world that seemed designed to reject people like her. Daniel took her hand. He told her he didn't want a fake fiancé anymore. He wanted a real future. The situation might have ended there, but the greatest test was still ahead. A few days later, Daniel's company faced a major crisis. A financial scandal involving one of his senior executives threatened to collapse investor confidence. Daniel was forced to choose between protecting the company's reputation and exposing the truth. Emily watched him struggle. She knew the decision could cost him billions. But she also knew the man she had come to love. She reminded him of something he had once told Sophie: doing the right thing mattered even when nobody was watching. Daniel exposed the fraud. The company survived, though he lost several major investors and a fortune in projected profits. For the first time in his career, he chose integrity over image. And something unexpected happened. People respected him more. The board withdrew its attempt to remove him. Employees rallied behind him. Investors returned. The crisis that could have destroyed his reputation instead revealed the character he had been hiding behind his wealth. But Daniel no longer cared about the headlines. He cared about the woman waiting for him at home. Months later, Emily stood in the same hotel where they had first met. This time, she wasn't wearing a borrowed coat. She wore a simple ivory dress. Sophie stood beside her, holding a small bouquet of flowers. There was no contract. No arrangement. No pretending. Only a man who had once believed money could protect him from pain and a woman who had once believed poverty made her unworthy of love. Daniel looked